All right. I think we are here and ready to go. David, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. There you go. Off we go. Alrighty, we're moving fast. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to our 10 Things You Must Know for Selling in 2021. David Zwarycz here, along with my wonderful colleague and business partner, Shay Hata. We're all from the Buy, Sell, Love team here in Chicago and at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services in Chicago. And this is the second part we're doing. We did a series last week on what you need to know for buying. We can actually share the link with you if you missed that. But this evening, we're going to be focusing on the selling side. And we're going to be going through 10 things. We're probably going to end up with 20 things we tell you, probably in different parts. Please know that we have the question and answer session. Ask those throughout. We will answer as we go along and come back at the end. And if there's something we missed, we'll certainly follow up and email you, but really do appreciate any interaction you have. We're going to try to keep this to about 35 minutes, but we'll stay on at the end and go with any questions. So I think that's what we've got, Shay. Sound like a plan?
Yep, that sounds like a plan. So I'm super excited that you all are here. I know a bunch of you, I recognize your names as past clients. So thank you so much for coming today. As David said, we really want to answer your questions as they come up. So please put any questions in the chat box. And if there's anything in particular you were hoping that we would talk about today, put that in the chat box now so we can make sure to address it. And then we'll also leave additional time at the end for other questions. So with that, we're going to jump right into our first slide.
Okay, we're going to start off with everyone's favorite question. If Shay and I got $1 every time we got this question, we would be retired by now. How is the market? And some brokers will always say it's great, and that's all you'll hear from them. We'll hopefully give you a little bit more nuanced view. And for the purpose of this conversation, we're going to be talking tonight largely about the greater Chicagoland market. We'll probably give some specific examples, but we're going to talk about that. If you're looking for a little bit more nuanced and sort of in-depth information about a specific neighborhood, feel free to ask, or we can follow up and we'll have a consultation with you, give you that information. But we're going to be looking sort of more at trends tonight, sort of what's going on in the market. So right now we are starting a new year, the first year after COVID. If you look here, this sort of, there are two numbers we're going to look at tonight. Listings under contract. This basically tells you how many homes went under contract, were active and had a list. So if you look, this looks at the last 6 months, and it's kind of coming, it starts back August, it was sort of peaked, and that was all kind of coming after COVID. It really was very, very solid and only really started dropping off just before Thanksgiving. So you saw at that point that we were really, they just slowed down, but it actually held pretty solid, had a little bit of slowdown sort of through Christmas week, New Year's, and then if you look in the last 3 weeks, we've been ticking up. So if you look at the ones in blue, and if we go to the next slide, we'll actually see a little bit more of the, just the last kind of couple weeks. The blue is this week. So every single week this year, we have had more homes go under contract or be under contract than there were at this time last year. And last year, and Shay can testify to this, we thought we were really in a busy market. The year had started off gangbusters, and we thought we were in for a great year. It turned out to be a great year with a big hole in the middle where things sort of slowed down. But everything we have on the actual homes going under contract, we see that more and more are going under contract. So that's a great sign. It shows that the demand is out there and it's stepping up and at a stronger level than last year. And we would think that, a lot of the demand from last year would have been sort of satisfied after sort of that solid 6-7 months we had of buying, but demand is still out there. So at the time that we see demand going up, we're going to look to the next slide, and which shows inventory. And this shows the amount of new listings coming out of the market. So after COVID and sort of the shutdown, lots of properties went down, and then slowly the inventory started going down. Things went under contract. Had a slowdown at Thanksgiving. Not a lot of things go on. Once again, in December, we had a lot more homes coming on than you would expect. Slowed down right around Christmas, New Year's. And then we started, if you look that first week of January, tons of listings. Usually you never see, you just don't see this. The listings were coming out. However, we see fewer listings actually going on the market than they did last year. Every single week we're lagging. So there's less inventory going on, but there's more demand than last year. So that's really going to be better news for this call. If we go to the next slide, it'll show you a little bit, just sort of the little snapshot in there, sort of look at those numbers. For buyers we talked to last week, it could be a little bit more challenging because they're going to be more multiple offer situations. For sellers, this really could mean that prices are really going to hold steady, especially with interest rates still towards record lows. So that's kind of where the market is. The simple version is it's good for it's good for sellers now. Demand is definitely stronger in the suburbs. I mean, Shay's been through multiple, just within the last 24 hours, a multiple offer in the suburbs. But in the city, we certainly have it. Certainly more in the single family home market. Condos are a little bit slower further north, so towards the lake are good. Downtown is a little bit challenging right now. But as we said, we're happy to answer a little bit more sort of micro data for neighborhoods.
And it
Jay,
really,
anything else?
I mean, it really is so dependent on the type of house that, or property that people want to buy. Now, I think that's what's so different about this market. In the past, we could say, oh, it's a really strong seller's market. It's a really strong buyer's market. Now it's such pockets, so if you own a condo in a high rise downtown, those are pretty hard to sell right now because buyers don't want to be in high rise buildings sharing elevators and lobbies with other people. If you own anything really in the suburbs, it's on fire. It's typically selling for over asking price and multiple offers in a couple of days. If you're in the city in a single family house, that's probably still popular. Townhouses are kind of right in the middle. Condos up north, smaller buildings like 4-unit buildings, those are doing better than the bigger buildings. Again, people want to be in less dense areas. So this is so market specific. This is a really good broad overview, and this makes us feel very confident because when COVID started, we didn't know how it was going to affect the housing market. And it's been a very strong housing market all through last year. We didn't know if that would continue this spring. And we're seeing indications that it's going to be an incredibly busy housing market this spring. I think busier than last year from what we're seeing so far. So if you're a seller, it should be a good market for you, again, depending on the type of property. So, if you have specific questions about your particular property, we're happy to answer that. So that leads us to the next question. When is the best time to list your house? Typically in the Chicagoland area, particularly in the city, after the Super Bowl, about end of February to beginning of March has been the best time in past years to list your property. In the suburbs, it's oftentimes a little bit later because a lot of people in the suburbs don't want to move until the summertime when their kids are out of school. They don't want to move their kids during the school year. This year, we're seeing that busy periods start earlier. So as David said, early January, as soon as January 1st hit, the market really shot up in activity. So we're encouraging all of our sellers to get on the market as fast as they can, especially as David said, while inventory is really low and buyer demand is high, that's when you want to get on the market. So, ideally, we're pushing to get all of our listings on the market in the next couple of weeks, if possible. We realize that timing doesn't work for everybody, and that's fine. But the earlier you can get your property on the market this year, the better. David, anything you can think to add to that?
No, I think definitely that. I think we're ready when you are. Shay and I will work. I've always worked to your schedule. If possible, we would suggest getting on by the end of the middle of April, just because it's just fewer buyers are going to be out there. I mean, you're going to sort of see peak buyers probably in March, maybe even early March. Usually that comes a little bit later. So that's sort of the timing. From sort of the time you tell us to go to the market, we can do it in about 10 days. We can turn it around. So once again, we'll work on your schedule, but generically the sooner the better, just sort of based on the market. But we know, you need to work with what works for you and your family.
And I think it's also important to think about, do you have a certain time frame you need to close during and work backwards from that? So typically closing in Illinois is 45 to 60 days from when you go under contract till you close and have to be out of your house. So if you don't, we talked to new sellers yesterday who they don't want to move until their kids are done with school in June. So we're talking to them about probably going on the market sometime in March, end of March at the latest. That way, if we get under contract in April, that's about that 60-day time frame to close mid-June. So, if you work back from when you want to move 45 to 60 days, then figure out how many days on market is the average in your neighborhood for your type of property. That gives you a good sense of when you should be going on the market. So, if you're in the suburbs and you're probably going to sell in a couple of weeks, figure that you want to go on the market 60 to 90 days before you want to move. If you're in the city and your average days on market in your neighborhood is 60 days, then you're probably going to want to go on the market about 120 days before you actually want to move. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb to figure it out. So that leads us to our next question. How do I buy and sell at the same time? So I think, David, do you want to start with this one?
You find very talented brokers is our first answer. Because when you have a buy or sell, when you have a buy or a sell, there are a lot of moving parts. When there's both, you have a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of timing to it. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tougher. We know that it's a lot complex. So sort of planning and sort of working, sometimes people are going to be sometimes they'll be working with a different broker on the outbound as they are on the inside. And sometimes that work. I mean, we work in the city and in the suburbs. We have a team of buyers, agents, and ourselves to help work with you. But just in terms of coordinating that sometimes works best in terms of coordinating that. But basically, we just want to have your ducks up in a row. I mean, part of that is starting to get your home ready. We're going to talk a little bit about sort of getting your home ready, the things you can do that. But also on the buy side, you're also going to be wanting to do sort of whatever front end research you can, going to open houses, sort of narrowing down neighborhoods, communities, sort of assessing your needs and wants. We do both a buyer assessment and a seller assessment, and we'll be sharing those resources, just sort of getting a sense of what you're going to need, because much of the process is sort of figuring out what those trade-offs are. So figuring that out with the buy side and figuring out what's going to have to do that, it is going to be impacted whether you have to buy or sell or not. And that's going to depend sort of on your finances, personal situation. And that's something we're happy to evaluate with you. But the person who's probably going to be the most help in evaluating that is a lender. And in a second, we're going to share a video from our go-to lender, Chad Lubben, who actually, he had a family obligation tonight, but we wanted to share some resources on that. Before I start that, Shay, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the first step oftentimes, if you have to buy and sell at the same time, is talking with the lender to figure out your financing options. Can you afford to purchase without needing to sell your home? And is that something you're comfortable doing? If not, Chad is going to talk about bridge loans as an option. So, that's a way for you to purchase without selling your home, but basically getting the equity out of your home to use as the down payment by the bank giving you a loan for that. So that's one option a lot of our clients do. Otherwise, the third option, which is the hardest option and the most stressful, but which is what a lot of people have to do, is do them both consecutive, or like right at the same time. So you actually close in the morning at say 9 a.m. on what you're selling, and then you do your purchase that same day in the afternoon at like 1 p.m. So you typically have to move out of your house the day before. All of your stuff is held in storage overnight until you can close on the next property. That one's hard, especially if you're looking to like buy a property in the suburbs where we know there's going to be multiple offers, because you really have to get your property under contract first before you can put a property in on another property, or an offer in on another property. So a lot of times what we'll do in that situation is get your property under contract and ask the buyers of your property for a really long closing date, like 90 days for closing date. That way, that gives you 45 or 60 days to find a new property, get under contract, and then try to line up the closing dates. But it's tricky. So the first step is always talking with the lender to figure out what your financing options are, because that's going to impact which of those options we can do. So David, do you want to play the video from Chad and he can explain that a little bit more?
Yep, here we go. There we go, and we're going to start.
Hello, clients of David, Shay, and I Love Chicago. It's an honor to get to shoot a quick video about a couple of things that Shay and David asked me to speak about. So number one, what options do I have when buying or selling a home? And that's a great question. So when you're selling a home, it becomes a little bit more complicated. Now, a lot of people have the mindset of, I'm going to sell my home and then I'm going to buy their home. The other home that I'm looking for. And that's called a contingent offer. That means Shay, David, Lauren, whoever you're working with on Buy, Sell, Love Chicago has to go to the other property and the realtor representing the other property and say, hey, we will buy your home, but we need to sell our home first. So that's called a contingent offer. And if you put yourself in the seller's shoes, that is not as ideal of offer as someone coming to them who does not have to sell their property. So I think it's important, if you're in that situation, to see if you can qualify without selling your home, right? The thought process many people come to me with is, hey, I don't really want to have 2 mortgages, and I don't have the money to put down on the new home without selling my current home. there is a loan program solution for that situation. It's called a bridge loan. So what a bridge loan does is it makes your current mortgage interest only. So that's benefit number one. It makes the current mortgage interest only. So it reduces the payment on your current home. And it taps into the equity of your current home to allow you to access some funds and put down on the new property. So that's called a bridge loan. I think it's super important to get with me, go through the numbers, see if that makes sense. Now, there are properties out there that Buy, Sell, Love Chicago might say, hey, it's okay to put in a contingent offer. They haven't had much activity. So every transaction's unique. Every transaction's different. Work with professionals. The second question they asked me to hit on is, what are interest rates doing? And that is a loaded question. So from January 5th through January 13th, all you saw were high levels of interest rate increases. The good news is about the last week to week and a half, interest rates have rallied. So the lowest interest rate ever available that I saw was on January 5th. That's 20 years of doing this. January 5th, that hit a few times throughout last year. We are very close to that. So we're about 0.25% off those lows. So you were seeing anywhere from 2% on a 15-year fix to 2.5% on a 30-year fixed. Now, keep in mind, there are 6 things that qualify you for an interest rate. There's not one blanket interest rate for everyone. Number 1, credit score. Number 2, loan program. Number 3, property type. Number
Oops.
Oh, a little technical difficulty. Hopefully we can get that video back in just a second. So while David's trying.
Number 2, loan program. Number 3, property type. Number 4, down payment. Number 5, how long do you need to lock in the interest rate? What that means is, hey, we're going to buy this home, but the closing's not for 90 days. That's going to be a higher rate if you lock in the rate than, hey, we're buying this home and we're closing within 30 days. That's a 30-day rate lock. So the rule is the shorter the rate lock, the better the interest rate or the better the pricing, right? And then the 6th and most important thing that makes up an interest rate is market trading of mortgage bonds. So interest rates change each and every day, just like a stock price changes each and every day. Sometimes it changes 3-4 times a day. So just know that is the most important thing of interest rates, not that each bank has these different rates. We all have access to the same money. We're all going to be fairly equal. It comes down to who you're comfortable with. If I can help you in any way, give me a call, 312-731-4939.
There we go.
All right, perfect. That's
one thing.
So,
and funny, is Chad recorded that for us this afternoon, and since that happened, as many of you seen, the stock market was down today. Mortgage rates actually improved today. So in the time since he was on that, and the Biden administration came out and said they're looking to hold rates stable. So the interest rates changed a lot. Shay and I have a good general sense of information, but it's always best to talk to a lender.
Absolutely. So, and that leads us to our next question, kind of what financing options do I have when I buy and sell? So, obviously Chad explained that. He also talked about the interest rates. That's one of the other reasons that we're encouraging sellers to get on the market a little bit sooner rather than later, if that's possible with your time frame, because interest rates have dropped back down in the last week or so, and we don't know how long they're going to stay low. In talking with Chad, he explained to us, and if you were on the buy call last week, you heard this, that Trump had a very heavy hand in keeping interest rates artificially low. And so Biden has indicated that he is not going to do that. So Chad thinks that within the next couple of months, interest rates are going to start to go up. Obviously, as that happens, that decreases buyer demand. So that's the other kind of part of the reason that we're telling sellers, try to get on the market earlier if you can this year, simply because as interest rates go up, the number of buyers might go down a little bit.
Shay, if you want to share your screen again.
Oh,
for our PowerPoint.
oh, I thought you guys could see it. Sorry. Hold on just a second. Well, while I'm trying to figure out how to get that to do that, David, do you want to start to answer the next question? What do I need to do now to get my home ready for the market?
Sure. We are, when it comes to this point in this process, we are, Shay has developed some amazing systems and sort of doing every step of getting your house ready for the market. And we'll give you pretty detailed messages on that. If there's one single thing that you are going to do in terms of getting your home ready for market, it is decluttering and reducing things in the home, which is the hardest and can sometimes be the most painful, but it is the most important. If you do nothing else, if you're not painting, if you're not updating, if you're not doing other things, reducing clutter in your house is the most important thing. They say that ideally, when you stage a property, or don't even stage it, it's best to look at a home when it has about 70% of what it normally has in it, because it's, as we always say, we're selling the space, not the stuff. So folks can easily be distracted, even if you have very nice things, and not sort of focusing on the space and seeing sort of the potential, because the object of much of the work we're doing is we're just trying to get the buyers to envision themselves living in there. And if you do that challenging work, if you think of it as a pre-pack, I think Shay and I have said this before, if you think of it as a pre-pack, maybe it can get you excited about this is the important part of getting you into the next home. So that's probably the most important thing. When we do our seller consultations, we will go through, we'll do an assessment. We can do it in person. We're doing a lot of them via Zoom right now just because of COVID and convenience. And we will do sort of an assessment and help you decide what are going to be sort of the most important things to do in terms of getting there. Shay?
Absolutely. And I would say also look at any repairs that you think you're going to need to have done and start to do those now. Even if you're not planning to go on until the spring or the summer or the fall, it's cheaper now to get people in to do repairs in your home because a lot of the contractors and service providers, they don't have as much work during the winter. So if you can, if they're not exterior repairs that need to be done, have them come in, do the electrical repairs, touch up painting and stuff now. I would also look at your paint colors. Red can look fantastic in a home in person, but it doesn't photograph well. So if you have really bright colors, bright yellows, bright blues, greens, reds, purples, those don't look good in photographs typically. So you're going to want to make all the paint colors very neutral, grays, whites, things like that. So, if you're thinking about doing any work to your property, painting, maybe you want to update a bathroom before it goes on the market, please call us. We're happy to help you pick out colors, pick out tile, let you know what buyers are going to like. And oftentimes we have great service providers who are cheaper than you could probably find on your own. And we know where to go to get cheap tile and cheap countertops and things like that. So, I think, as David said, the decluttering, looking at the repairs, looking at your paint, and then if you're going to do any rehab projects, bring us in to make sure that you're picking the right stuff that's going to really resonate with buyers. All right, so the next question then is going to be, what's it like selling a home during COVID? Is it safe? So the good news is, we've had 10 months of this now of figuring out how to make this very safe for our sellers. So we have put a lot of procedures in place to make sure that you feel comfortable. So some of those are, as David explained, when we're going to do a listing presentation and a seller consultation with you, where we talk about what you can do to get your home ready, what price your home is going to sell for, we're happy to do those in person. But if that doesn't feel comfortable for you, we're happy to do those over Zoom instead. When we come do the photos, you're welcome to not be in the home. You can leave the windows open so that there's good ventilation. And then we can leave when we're done so that you don't have to be in the same space with us. We'll of course wear masks, gloves, take our shoes off, all of those kinds of things. For showings, what we're doing is telling our sellers we're doing touchless showings. So we're asking you to leave all the lights on, all the closet doors open. And that way we don't have to touch anything. The buyers don't have to touch anything. So they can just peek in and look at the closets. The only things that they're going to touch would be the door handle on the front of the property and on the back of the property. And that is it. We are asking them to wear masks. We're also asking them to either wear gloves or use hand sanitizer before they come in and to take off their shoes. The other thing we're doing is asking them to fill out a COVID disclosure before we'll do a showing with them. So it asks them if they've been exposed to anyone that has COVID, if they're waiting on test results, if they've tested positive. Again, it's not foolproof, but all of these things help put more precautions in place. We're also doing a lot more technology for our listings. So, in addition to professional photos, we're doing floor plans, we're doing Matterport 3D tours, and then we're actually doing a physical tour with a camera, a high quality camera where we show the insides of the closets, the inside of the refrigerator, things like that that people cannot see during the normal photos and 3D tour. And what happens with that is we're finding we're getting a lot less in-person showings because people are able to really screen the properties well online. And so it's almost like when they're coming in person, it's really more like a second showing at that point because of the amount of information that we have out there. You know, when it comes to inspection time, we're asking just the inspector and maybe one of the buyers to come, or we can have the inspector go through the findings via phone. You don't have to go to closing. You can pre-sign those documents. So, you know, we have figured out a lot of ways to keep everybody very, very safe. We have, you know, we don't have any instances of a known transmission from a showing in any of our properties. You know, so I think you can feel very comfortable that we can keep you safe during this. David, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you've hit on all the important ones. I mean, I think with, because we've invested a lot more money and time in terms of those video things. And I think we were looking at our numbers in the latter half of the year last year, the listings we sold were sold in shorter times than the year before. And we probably did about 20% fewer showings per listing, just because through the videos, the ones we narrate, as well as the 3D tours, people really had a sense. It ruled out people, which was good. They were people who didn't need to see your property. So we'll do that. Another thing we also do is, for a lot of people, the first weekend you're on the market, a lot of our sellers have been going away, staying with family, maybe staying at a weekend house and spending that first weekend. And we try to really just show the house as much as we can, get people through. So we hopefully can front end those showings and sort of decrease exposure. So at every sort of turn, we're there, and we are very sensitive, and we're going to definitely meet you sort of where you're at and making sure that what we're doing, if you're not comfortable with an open house or other things, we'll work around it, and it's worked out very well.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one question we didn't have in here, but we're getting a lot along the same lines is how does the schedule work with people, you know, working from home all day on Zoom and kids e-learning? Like, how is that being handled? I know that's a stress point for a lot of our sellers. And so we're really just talking to you and finding out, can you do showings during the day, during the week? If you can't, because you're working from home and you're on the computer all the time, you have kids e-learning, it's fine. We'll work around it. We can just do showings at night, you know, between 5 and 7, you know, if that doesn't work for you, we can just do showings on the weekend. So, you know, because of COVID, people are much more understanding if there's limited times as well to be able to do showings. So, you know, if that's stressing you out, how are you going to keep a house clean with kids home during the week? Don't worry about it. We can just do showings on the weekends. All right. So that takes us to our next question. What key things do I need to know about the selling process? So, you know, as we said, you really want to think about that time frame, 45 to 60 days to go under, you know, that it's going to take from contract to close. You know, I think some important things are a lot of prep work. So one of the things that we suggest for any clients who have older properties would potentially be a pre-inspection on the property, so that you know if there's anything big that's going to come up during the inspection, so we can try to keep that contract together. We just did a pre-inspection on one of our properties. It's about 100 years old. It's going to go on the market soon, and we found asbestos in the property. You know, that can be a deal killer. David and I, we've been doing this long enough. We know asbestos usually isn't that big of a deal, but for a buyer, it's terrifying when you hear asbestos or mold, you know, or lead-based paint, anything like that. And so now we can have a company come in, take care of the asbestos, you know, for probably a couple $100 before we even go on the market. And now we have a better chance of keeping that contract together once we go under contract. So a lot of the things that we ask our clients to do is a lot of prep work. So, you know, potentially that pre-inspection, that decluttering, things like that. Once you go on the market, I think one of the questions people have is, how many showings am I going to get? Am I going to be inundated with 50 showings? You know, that's going to be somewhat dependent on where you are. If you're in the suburbs, you're probably going to have more showings. Typically, what we recommend for our clients is, let's go on the market like Wednesday or Thursday, maybe go to an Airbnb or a hotel for the weekend, and then we'll get everybody in from like Friday night through Sunday for the showings. If we think it's a property that will sell really quickly, that's a good strategy, because then potentially by Sunday night or Monday, we're under contract. You can come back from out of town. You only had to get the house cleaned up one time, and then you can sort of go back to normal living at that point. You know, if you're in a market, you know, in the city, a condo market in a high rise where we think it's going to take longer to sell, we would expect maybe 4 or 5 showings, I would say on average that first week, and then it will probably slow down to 2 or 3 showings after that. So you don't really have to be worried about 20, 30 showings when you go on the market. I think that's kind of, a thing that people get worried about unnecessarily. From there, it's really going under contract, doing the inspection, negotiating those inspection items. And then once we've negotiated those inspection items, then the deal typically is pretty solid from there through closing. David, what do you want to add to this?
I think you'd be out of the important ones. I mean, one of the great things I've had with partnering Shay, she's an amazing systems person. If you look on the Buy, Sell, Love website, some amazing blog posts sort of taking you through the process. And the thing you should know, I think, particularly if you're working again with Shay and with me together, we are going to let you know about every one of these steps as we go along. We have a very rigorous system letting you know. So if you need to know everything ahead of time, we're going to give you that list and you'll have it. If you just need to know what's next, we'll do that. And our thought is we're going to ask you to do as much work as we need to get your home sold quickly. We're not going to ask you to do things that we don't think are going to save you money or save you time on the market. We're not going to ask for renovations that aren't going to be a good return on investment. So the selling process is very customized to your property, the listing, and the neighborhood. And sort of the key thing to know, I think, is starting off with a really good sort of consultation, going through and sort of plotting ahead. And we will keep you apprised of every single step.
And the one thing I think I would add to that is be really open with your realtor about what you're concerned about. If you have fears about the showing process, about COVID, about keeping your house clean, about getting dogs out for showings, whatever it is, believe me, we've come across it 50 million times before, and we typically have solutions for all of those scenarios. So just tell us if there's something that's making you nervous. We want to make this process as stress-free for you as possible. And usually there are ways to work around those concerns and make it an easier process for you. So the next question, is there anything I shouldn't do before selling? David, do you want to start with this one?
It's in some ways I'd say anything. Don't do anything without talking to us first. Don't rush into anything. I think Shay brought it up earlier, before doing any painting, any projects, talk to a realtor, hopefully us, and let's sort of assess what needs to be done. Shay was talking about this listing we just did where we did a pre-inspection. That was a huge concern of the seller. This couple has lived in this home for 30 years. They know everything that hasn't been perfect. A buyer's not going to see that. They had much more anxiety about it than really when we went to the inspection. We found some things and we're taking care of them, and we're spending money that things we know that will come up or will be visible on showings. So we're being preemptive. Our rules are, will you at least get that amount of money back, or will it save you time on the market? That's another thing, when we talk about staging, empty properties, sometimes the best strategy is staging. That sometimes makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. If it makes sense to virtually stage it, that's something we work with and is certainly much more affordable. That's the cost that we bear. And just do it on the front end. So I think the big shouldn't do is don't do anything until you've sort of thought about it, because we don't want you to spend a dime more on this process than is necessary.
Yep, absolutely. So that takes us to our last question. Are there any secrets, tricks, tips, etc., that we can share with you guys? There's a lot of them. We'll just give you a couple of them. For instance, a couple of the things that we've been doing the last few years that have worked really well are we've been having the sellers write a letter to the buyers before the inspection, and then we leave it at the property. Pre-COVID, we left it with some, granola bars and water and snacks like that. Obviously, with COVID, we're not doing that. But what we have found is if you can get the buyers to like you, they will ask for less inspection stuff. It's just a silly psychological thing that we have realized over the years. So by leaving that letter, welcoming them to the home, telling them about the neighbors, saying how excited you are for them to buy the home, even if you're not, just put that in there. And it makes them feel like, oh gosh, these sellers are so nice. And they will ask you for less stuff on inspection. So that's one of the things that we've learned over the years. The other thing that we've really learned is that we're not just selling the home, we're selling the neighborhood if it's in a building, we're selling the neighbors in the building. So one of the things we also ask you to do is put together a top 10 list of reasons you love living in that property. And we don't want it to be things that are obvious that the buyer can see. We don't want you to say, oh, you love the kitchen because there's a lot of counter space. Well, they can see that. What we want you to put in there is that Sally and Bob, who live next door, are so amazing. You know, they're constantly baking food and leaving treats at your door. When you go out of town, they're bringing in your mail, they're feeding your cat. You know, that the neighbors upstairs are really quiet. They travel a lot for work, so they're never there, you know, which people love that. Your favorite coffee shops you like to walk to, bike paths that are around, dog parks, you know, all those kinds of things. And again, that's somewhat customized for your property. So if you're in more of a single family home, we're going to want to talk about things as a family you can walk to, playgrounds that are nearby, you know, if you can walk to the school, things like that, right? You know, if you're in a 1-bedroom condo, we're probably going to talk more about like restaurants, coffee shops, things like that. So there are a lot of different strategies like that that we have employed over the years that we have found work really well. We also talked again about the pre-inspection, you know, so if you have an older home that we think that makes sense for, our goal is to keep the contract together. So we might suggest that. The other thing we might suggest is a pre-appraisal. So, you know, especially if you're out in the suburbs and we think that your property could sell in multiple offers for over asking price and over fair market value, we will probably suggest having a pre-appraisal done. The cost of that's about $350. We recently did this on a property and the appraisal came in at $825,000. We knew we could sell it for more than that, or at least we thought we could. We put it on the market at $850,000. We had multiple offers on that property at that $850,000. We went back to those buyers and said, look, you know, we had an appraisal done, it appraised at $825,000. We will go forward with the buyer who is willing to bridge the gap between the appraisal price and the purchase price. So what that means is if it comes in at $825,000, they will bring $25,000 in cash to the table so that the seller is still guaranteed to get their $850,000. One of the buyers said, yes, they'd be willing to do that. And so that's who we picked and moved forward with that on that transaction. And so that way our seller was guaranteed to get that $850,000. So, you know, there's a lot of strategies. And again, it's very dependent on the type of property that you're selling. And so we can go through those with you, but we have a lot of kind of tricks and tips up our sleeve, you know, to help you sell faster and keep more money in your pocket. David, anything else you can think of to add to that?
No, I think those are the big ones. I mean, something you'll find in our process is we do ask a lot of questions on the front end. Probably you'll end up doing a little bit more paperwork on the front end than you do with a lot of our other brokers. We want to know your property intimately. We want to know the details about your appliances and service information. We provide all this, and we oftentimes will get comments at showings and thanking people because, as we said, you know, one of the most important things we do is help a buyer envision her or himself there and seeing themselves in the space. And anything we can do to sort of do that through information and making the house and making it appealing is really good. So I think you'll see as we sort of go through and discuss with our process, there are going to be more questions from us, but we found that they really have avoided a lot of issues on the back end and have allowed us. I mean, I think our buyers, our sellers are often surprised how often we end up with multiple offers in demand on the first week, even on properties that you wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was everything we had, you guys. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We're happy to stay on for a couple of minutes and answer them. We did record this, so we will put this on our Facebook page as well. So you're welcome to go there and take a look at it. Our contact information is on here. Please feel free to reach out to us anytime or to Chad Lubben at Summit Funding if you have any financing questions. So we thank you all so much for coming. Have a great and healthy 2021. Anything else you want to say, David?
No, we look forward to speaking to you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.